All right, in this video, we're going to look at ways to actually modify our document object model, not just the text contents, but to actually modify and add nodes and change the contents of nodes to our document object. So there's a couple methods that we can use on the document interface. There is a create element, which lets us create an element. So we could create a new div, we could create a paragraph, we could create an unordered list. And we can also create text nodes within those elements. We can create a text nodes. Remember, most elements will have a text node attached to them, and we can create text nodes to go along with those elements. The node interface itself has methods to append children. So we're going to add a child onto a particular node. We have methods to insert items before an existing node. So find some existing thing and add something new before it. We have the ability to replace a child. Take this existing child and take this existing node and replace it with this node. And we also have the ability to remove a node completely. And we have also a remove that will remove a node or can remove itself. This one is a little bit new. Not all browsers might support it yet. I think this content is old enough that I think it's probably fully supported by now, but don't quote me on that. All right, so let's look at a little sample application of where we might use something like this. We have a button on a page. We have a paragraph that says first paragraph, a paragraph that says last paragraph. We have this button that says add to DOM. When we click it, it adds another paragraph in the middle. Okay? So we start out with, here's our first paragraph, here's our last paragraph, and here's our button. And when our button gets clicked, it's going to run some JavaScript. And this is the JavaScript that it's going to do. So we're calling document, call the document object and say create an element of type P. So we're going to create a paragraph element. That creates the paragraph. And then we assign that to a variable, or excuse me, a constant new paragraph. And then we're going to call document create text node. And we're going to create a text node that says middle paragraph. So we've got the paragraph element, and now we have a text node that says middle paragraph. Okay. And then we're going to take that new paragraph we just created, the P, right here it is, new paragraph. We're going to append child, and we're going to attach that text node. So now we have a paragraph that has a text node that says middle paragraph. So notice the two steps there. We had to create the element. We had to create the text that's going to go in the element, and then we had to attach this text node to the paragraph tag as a child. Okay. Now we're going to go out to our HTML and we're going to find this first paragraph. Okay, so first paragraph, we're going to use the dollar function and get P. So that only returns one element. It's going to return the first paragraph. Even though there's multiples on there, it's only going to get the first one. Okay. And then we're going to create a constant to get that first paragraph's parent node. Okay, so whatever that paragraph is inside, we're going to get that node. And then we're going to insert before. Insert the new paragraph tag after the first paragraph tag, before the element. So this is a little bit confusing, but it's before the element that comes after the first paragraph tag. Okay. So we're going to get that first paragraph, get its next element sibling, which would be the second paragraph. Okay. And we're going to insert that new paragraph just before it. So let's go over that again, because it can be a little confusing. We're going to get the first paragraph. Then we're going to use that to get its next element sibling, which is the second paragraph, and we're going to insert that new paragraph we created before the second one, which puts it in the middle. and makes the middle paragraph. I hope that makes sense. Run through it in your head a few times, and we'll go on. Actually, I'm not going to make a new video. I'm just going to go on, I believe. Let's look at an application that actually makes use of this. And it's the same application we saw in our previous video. Let's get out of here. And let me pull this application up. And let's open it. Okay, this looks very familiar. We just saw it. Hopefully I've got the right one open. I'm going to click register without putting anything in there. And what's different about this is that instead of putting our error messages and replacing the required field, little asterisks here, we're actually creating an element up here that contains an unordered list of all the error messages. In this case, there's 4 error messages. So it's the same application, that registering for account, but this time, instead of modifying some elements, these span elements that already existed, instead of modifying them, we're actually creating a new element on our page that lists all the errors that the user needs to correct. Now, I don't know that this is better. Personally, I think it's better to show the user right where the problem is that they need to fix, and I preferred the other way, but we also need to understand how this works because it's used for a lot more than just this. So let's take a look at that quickly. Our HTML page is identical. We didn't change a thing on it. Let's look at the CSS page. The CSS page, we have a new class called messages that is set to red with a solid red border. And we saw that when you saw the errors, that's what it's going to look like. Solid red border, color red. It's got some padding and some margin set on it. But this is the formatting for that. Let's take a look at the actual magic, the JavaScript. Let's start with process entries. So when somebody clicks the button, we're going to go through, we're going to get references to our 4 controls, and then we're going to create an array of messages. So here's a blank array. It has nothing in it, and it's called messages. So this is going to hold the error messages that we find as we process and we validate the input. Okay. If they didn't type something in for their email address, it's going to add a message. Notice messages.length. Length is 0, so it's going to make an item 0 in our messages array that says, please enter an email address. Okay. If the phone was blank, it's going to add onto the end of our array another message that says, please enter a mobile phone number. And then for each of these as we go, and you saw I just clicked it without putting anything in, so I had all 4 messages. So now I have a message array that has 4 messages in it, numbered 0 through 3. Okay. If I would have completed everything correctly, the length of my messages would have been 0. I wouldn't have had any error messages, and it would let me submit the form. But because I hadn't selected anything and I have these 4 error messages, it's going to call this function called display error messages. Now let's go look at display error messages, because this is where we modify the DOM. Here's display error messages, and notice it has a parameter. It's accepting the parameter messages, okay, because we're passing it in that array of messages that we had generated. So it's got those 4 messages contained in this argument gets passed into this parameter messages up here. So we're going to have that array available to us in this function. So what do? We create, so we use document.createElement to create a new unordered list. Okay, and then that unordered list, we're going to add a class name to it. So that's going to be an unordered list called messages. That class list, that class messages, if you remember, in our CSS class is what gives it its formatting. So by applying that class list and just adding that messages class to it, we're going to get the formatting. So unordered list with that formatting applied to it. Then we have a little for loop that's going to go through each one of our messages. For every, we have a temporary variable set up called message. For each one of the messages, it's going to temporarily be held in that variable, and we're going to create a list item. So document create element list item, and then we're going to create a text node with that message, and we're going to add the text message onto that list item, and then we're going to take that list item and add it to the unordered list. Okay, so it's multiple steps to get us there, but basically it creates a list item and attaches it to our unordered list for each message. So I had 4 messages. It's going to run through here 4 times. You're going to create the first one, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. Again, it creates the list item, creates a text node, adds the text node to the list item, and then adds the list item to the unordered list that we created before the loop started. Okay. Then we're going to go look, check to see if we have a node of unordered lists. If it's not in the document, if it's null, then we add that unordered list right before our form. Okay, so we're adding the unordered list right before our form. Okay, if the unordered list already existed, meaning maybe we've clicked it once and we had some other errors, but we didn't fix them all, we're going to replace it. We're going to replace that unordered list with our new unordered list. So follow that logic. If the unordered node is in the document, we're going to add it right before the form. We're going to add the unordered list. If it's already there, we're going to replace it with the new one that we just created up here. And that's the magic. That's how it works. We've covered process entries. Reset form works a little different. We call the form reset. We remove that unordered list with all our error messages, so we don't have to. That is one of the nice things here. We just get to remove that unordered list. We don't have to process anything else individually. And we set focus back to the beginning. So this is 2.0 version of our register application.